Today we're going to start a new segment called What's in My Sewing Kit? Now, this is my sewing kit, which is a tackle box. And honestly, this is only part of my sewing kit because my sewing kit consists of boxes down there, and boxes up there, and stuff over here, and a giant mess. So we are going to take this one section at a time, and I'm going to show you cutting implements today. So this is my box for cutting implements. Okay, and honestly, some of them live other places most of the time, but I have collected them for sake of ease and to show you all. So in my sewing life, I like to use a lot of different cutting implements for various purposes. You know, I have your standard pair of really good dressmaker shears. There's a nice pair of gingers. I do highly recommend having at least one nice pair. This pair I try to only use for lightweight fabrics so that it stays nice and sharp. For things that are harder to cut, so I don't want to have to sharpen them often. I try to keep one pair that is just like for silks, satins, other things that really take some time to cut, so and precision. I could only find one of these, but I actually own several pairs of these. I love them. I started using these when I broke this thumb in high school, and when I do a large amount of cutting, particularly with the ginger rests right on the spot. The opening motion aggravates this joint, so I absolutely love these Fiskars. I will use these. I have another pair somewhere that is a different handle, so I can tell the difference between the two. And I use one with my craft scissors for and that's the other pair, so I'm not sure where it went. It might be out with my dye stuff. I use that pair for cutting up craft things and whatnot, stuff that I don't mind that it's dull, and then I keep one pair of these that I also keep sort of nicer, that just cuts fabric. So this I would use for when I'm cutting heavier duty things. You know, if I'm doing a lot of cutting of heavy materials, anything that might have sequins or I don't know, stuff that might dull my fabric easier. I also have really started to fall in love with rotary cutters. I have two here that I like. I like this tiny one for, this one I find works better when I'm doing curves and stuff, when I'm doing a lot of curves, or intricate work, and trying to really follow a shape of a pattern. And this one is great for long straight lines, and I change these blades out fairly regularly, and I need to get one of those sharpener things that they make to make them last longer. But yeah, just once they start to get dull, I change them out. So I do highly recommend getting a couple of different rotary cutters and a rotary mat for sewing, because it really has changed how fast I can cut things out. Anytime you're cutting long straight pieces of things, these are great. I love them for making bias binding, because there's a way that you can fold fabric and then down to a small piece of fabric, and then you can cut across the bias and get a bunch of bias binding really quick with a rotary cutter, and I find it easier to do with a rotary cutter than with scissors. Okay, so let's talk more. Let's go into small scissors. So I have a variety of small scissors. I do like gingers. You don't have to own gingers. There are other companies that work just as well. I really love having a pair of snips around. These usually live near my sewing machine. They're just easy to grab, snip a thread. I don't really use them for anything but snipping threads. I've never found them really great at cutting into things. We're getting out of focus here. I'm gonna have to see how focused this stayed. But yeah, so they're nice. I have this pair, which is my tailor 5-inch tailor points, I think is what they were called. This is what I use when I am doing really precise work. I've had these quite a while. I think I got these back in college. They're really good for cutting very close into something, like when you're tailoring and you're doing pockets or clipping. You really want to make sure that you get to a thread but not cut through it, and these are great for that, getting into like tight little corners and stuff. They kind of have let's see if I can get this to focus. They have like a more rounded side and then a pointier side, so you can get really into things. And then I have a little pair of embroidery scissors. These are good for cutting small things. This point can get really in to like clip stuff off. Yeah. So I have those. Always important to have a couple of razor blade type things. I have this. I have, box knife. I also just literally keep, straight razors around. They're good for a number of things, ripping open stuff, whatnot. Here I have another. I don't use these much anymore, but, and they also don't close well. I mean, when you squeeze them. But again, when I was investigating the world of spring action, I tried these for a while. They weren't bad. Not nearly as good as the Gingers, though. I like to keep a couple of different X-Acto blades. So this is, your standard X-Acto blade. But I also really love this shape one when I'm sewing. This one is great for seam ripping, actually. I use this one as a seam ripper. I lost the cover for this one. And then I have a variety of seam rippers, because I feel like one should own a variety of seam rippers. They actually are different sizes, so this one is a little bit better for getting into smaller things. This one has a nice big seam ripper on it. I think, is this one even smaller? And that one is even a little bit smaller. Like, just a little bit. I don't know. Good for delicate things. Oh, other thing I own. This doesn't live in this box because it doesn't really fit. A pair of pinking shears. Pinking shears are serrated, or not, well, yeah, is it serrated? I don't know. They've got this cutting edge so that when you cut something with them, you get a jagged edge, and it stops it from fraying. I forgot to mention with pinking shears, okay, so these actually hurt my hands a lot when I use them, so I don't use them very often anymore. And I really, really want to get, they make a pinking rotary blade. It's not quite as, it doesn't do quite the same shape as these, but you can get a rotary blade version. I've done a lot of pinking recently, and they're just, they're much stiffer to use. And again, like I said, this movement kind of ends up hurting this joint for me. So, and that's the other thing, is sometimes you need to look at ergonomics. There was a job I used to work at that had spring-loaded gingers that worked similarly to this. They had a spring in them, and I had a little. And I loved that pair of scissors. It actually worked quite well for me, but it still had like the ginger weight. It still looked like a pair of gingers. It just had a spring in here. I don't know, ergonomics and the amount of stuff that I cut, like especially when I was a cutter draper. When I was a cutter draper, I was cutting all the time. So this movement, moving this is a lot easier for me than the movement here, which I move this part a lot more when I'm working with this type of scissor. And then, yeah, like once I really got into using rotary blades, like that's even easier because then you're just pushing. And there's a couple of different types of rotary blades. There's, this style. There's more of this stick style. There's another brand that makes larger ones that are more of this style. You kind of just have to find what you like and what you feel comfortable with. And that's like the biggest tip that I can give you is just try different things, see what works. You might find that's the thing is I grew up, my mom taught me how to use a seam ripper, right? And then I go to school and everybody at school is using razor blades. Or there was one girl who she would rip everything with this. She was really good somehow at just literally cutting down the seam. I can do that occasionally, and not always. I ended up really falling in love, like I said, with things this shape. I actually have one. I forget where I got this, but I used to use this as a seam ripper. This worked the best for me out of everything. And then once this started to get dull, I needed to find a replacement. And that's when I came across these X-Acto blades. They're much bigger, but I love them. I still use a regular seam ripper a lot, but there's a lot of times where I will literally just reach for a razor blade as a seam ripper too. There's no one right tool for everyone for everything, so just have fun with it. Try some different things. Learn how to do something in a new way. And then also when I was looking around, I found these. These are my other little pair of Ginger nippers. This pair is not one of my favorites. I used to just take it with me for using at work, which is why it has a red thing on it so that I remember that it's mine. It's like my quick little, I need snips. I forget when I bought this, but this is a embroidery or thread, coin. It actually has a tiny blade inside of here, you can see. And I attached it to a drawstring thing to keep on my apron for sewing at work. I think I was always losing my scissors, and then my scissors, because I used to keep this pair around my neck on a loop around my neck, right? But it would always end up, the cover would fall off and the end would start stabbing me or cut holes in my clothes or whatever, or I'd accidentally end up cutting the ribbon that it was on, that sort of weird stuff. So I picked this thing up at one point to use for that way I always had something with me to cut threads on sewing machines, or if I was trying to get a thread off of something really quick backstage, just a quick little quick little tool that was fairly safe because you can't really get your fingers in there. And I actually just keep it living right here on my thread bag, so that I have it close by for my sewing machines and serger if I need it. That was a tour of my cutting implements. As I said, I have many of them. You don't need to have all of these, but also don't feel like you have to function with one pair of scissors to do everything. Many of these have very specific uses that I use them for. Like I said, some not so much anymore, but I definitely use these for a different purpose than I use these, then I use these, then I use the big ones. Each one has their place. And if you are having problems cutting stuff and you feel like what you're working with isn't great, there's a plethora of sewing scissors, shears, rotary cutters, all sorts of different types of, cutting implements. I mean, I've worked, there was one job I worked where we literally had disposable scalpels that we used for specific costume cutting things. We were cutting a lot of latex, and the disposable scalpel worked really well for that. So, don't be afraid to own a lot of stuff. I definitely am not. Just wait until you see it all.